Hi, Janine Vosper. Welcome to this presentation of 5 key strategies to elevate your personal brand. And doing so, you will engage more clients. The first thing that I usually get my participants to respond to is what actually is a personal brand and what does it mean? Hence, we're in this space. I will tell you. You're probably guessing anyway. It is not necessarily what you think it is. It is what it is perceived by others. It's such an important thing to remember all the way when we're talking about personal brand is how it is perceived by others. It is an emotional based narrative of how your product or service improves the lives of your customers. Depends on how well you tell that story and how it is represented. We'll talk about some more components of that in a moment, but I want you to remember that it's how it's perceived by others. What we want to be able to do, there's a very crowded marketplace, and I'm guaranteeing that there's probably people that do things very similar to what you do. What we want to be able to do is stand out and be seen. And how do we do that? If you're one of these big brands, it's a little bit easier. We tend to recognize a lot of these. We recognize the color behind it. We recognize the logo. We recognize even what that brand means. If we're looking, say, at McDonald's, then we know that it's, if we go in for a McDonald's burger, we know exactly what we're going to get. If we're going into IKEA, we know that we'll probably get lost walking up and down all the aisles, but we will also know that the products that we want are pre-packed. We're going to have packed. We're going to have to put them together ourselves. We want to be able to build something that's very consistent, and that's what these brands are doing well. Now, I'm not going to talk today about colors, although I love this slide, so I wanted to include it in what I'm demonstrating. Depending on what you are trying to portray to your prospective clients is maybe the colors that you might choose. And if you look at some of these, you can sort of guess, oh, that is quite, does represent what the sense or the feeling of that particular brand is. For my colors, it's orange, a little bit darker and brighter than the orange that's on here. And it's also a navy blue. I'm combining what is to me is to be fun, but also have confidence in what you're doing and really believe in who you are and be able to do that very authentically. But the navy represents really solid brands. It's brands that people get to know and trust. A lot of our banks and financial positions, they actually do a lot of that dark blue and navy. If you haven't done your colors, have a think about that, what that means and what it means to you importantly. If you are more into the psychic sort of services, then you might tend to go with more purples and things that will relate. But again, I'm not doing colors today, but I want you to be aware that it is such an important factor as to what you do and who you are. What we're going to be talking about in the 5 key strategies to elevate your personal brand is we're going to talk about knowing your why. You probably hear this quite a bit, is to understanding and knowing your why. Why are you doing what you're doing? We're going to look at knowing your product. Now, that might seem a bit weird because I'm assuming you're very good at what you do, and whether it's a product or service, and you know it well. But I'm going to look at that a little bit differently. The third point is to know your audience. What I see when I'm teaching in sales is a lot of people don't know their audience and they get their message wrong and they miss the mark, whether it's a pitch or it's standing on stage in front of thousands of people. You really want to be able to hit that target market. I remember when I presented the image that's on the screen, I presented to 1,000 people in the audience. It was a little bit different presentation. It was talking about work-life balance, but the audience were a group of women who are in business and working very long hours and trying to figure out what that actually means and the guilt around it. Hence why that presentation suited that audience. The fourth part we're going to look at is to know how to tell your story. I think that's the most important factor when it comes to anything to do with pitching, speaking. What is your brand? Is to be able to have a consistent story or stories that you can tell and how you can tell those stories. And the fifth one is just knowing how to get attention. And we want to get attention and be memorable for the right reasons. So let's have a look at some points for number one about knowing your why. You probably hear lots of statements where you really need to know your why or your purpose in behind what you're doing. And you do. This is the starting ground for everything that you do. Is what you're doing resonating with your values, with your beliefs and who you are? And if it's not, then you're going to be up struggle street. There's some points here that I want you to take away and think about. Why does your brand exist? It's such a great starting point. I mean, why are you doing what you are doing? So, and usually it is because you had a problem, you found a solution for it, and now you want to share that solution with other people. That is one of the best reasons to be able to do something. How do you then define that story to deliver it to others in a way that sees you as the expert in this? What is your brand's mission and what do you hope your brand will solve? Truly understanding the problems of your clients and the problems that you are solving, whether you've got a service or a product, is the most important thing that you can do when you're starting up a business. If you don't have an idea here, you're really not going to have the success that you want because you can't explain yourself well. What are your brand values? Such an important aspect. And when I teach people how to define their vision or their mission for their business, it can take hours. It's not something quite simple usually, and it has to be dug deep to find those answers. Well, how do you contribute to the world, and what will you contribute to the world? What do you my vision, and just so that you can maybe get an idea of what I'm talking about, my why. My vision is for small business owners to take over the world. That's my vision. My mission, if you imagine the mission impossible, if you choose to accept this, my mission is to enable people to do what they didn't believe was possible. So that's what I do every day. That's my mission in my business, in my life. It keeps me focused, it keeps me on track because it's so very clear for me. That's what I do. And wanting to know what you do and be able to explain it to people is absolutely vital. I love these quotes. There's going to be quotes all the way through. You have a masterpiece inside of you, you know, one unlike any that has ever been created or ever will be. If you go to your grave without painting your masterpiece, it will not get painted. No one else can paint it, only you. Isn't that a brilliant quote? Step number 2 is to know your product. Again, defining these points. What is your product? How do you define it? Do you define it as a benefit, or do you define it as a thing that it does? How does your product work? How does it work for other people? That is such an important factor. We talked about, I mentioned the why in the previous one, but how does your brand relate to your brand's why? Is it connected? Is it related to your values and your belief system? Talked about mission and values, and we were focusing on those in the last why, but this all lends itself from one step to the next. It's who you are and how people will see you day in and day out. And what makes your product different from everything else is out there, having a unique selling proposition. You need to get very clear on this as you are delivering your message. What is it that makes you unique? And I know when I work with my sales training, that is one of the things that people often really struggle with. You might be finding that as well, that you're struggling with, well, why am I unique? What's going to set me apart? And I guarantee when we spend some time together, I can define it. Sometimes people miss the point themselves because you're too close to it. It's how it's seen by others. This quote here, brand is just a perception, and perception will match reality over time. Sometimes it'll be ahead, sometimes it'll be behind, but brand is simply a collective impression that someone has about your product. The third one is know your audience. Who is your target market? What do you know about your target market and their needs and pain points? Possibly, if you are delivering a service where you've used in the past, this will have been you in the past. But because you have moved through that and solved the problem, either a product or service, then it's really hard for you to sit back in that space as your prospective client because you're not there anymore. I worked with some clients recently, and he really could not define his target market. And after brainstorming some ideas, because he kept saying what he didn't want, and that's great because we could figure out all the things he didn't want, we were able to come up with someone so specific that if he was ever in a quick pitching, a 1 minute pitch thing or a speed networking, he'd be able to say, this is who I'm looking for. And it was really clear. And it gets all of the other not prospects out of the way. People worry about if they're too defined, they're going to miss out on other business. I guarantee you will not do that. How does your target market relate to your why and the needs and pain points? Such an important factor. Are they going to relate to it? Is your service or product relevant to what they want? How does your product relate to your target audience? What is your product's direction in relation to your target audience? Take these questions away. I'm happy for you to take a photo of the screenshot, or better still, book a 30-minute consultation, a free complimentary strategy call, and we can chat about these points and figure out some things so you can get a little bit more clarity. The quote here, a lot of companies forget that they need to be thinking about their customers, hearing the feedback and listening to their problems. At the end of the day, you want to solve those problems. So how are you going to do that if you really don't understand what they are? One of the best ways is to ask the people that are working with you at the moment, ask the people who've bought your product, what problem has that product solved for them? That's one of the best ways to do it. But you really do need to understand it and get very clear on it, because you can't do any marketing unless you do all of this base work. And then when you do, you're really able to promote yourself and your brand very authentically and very consistently. Number 4, know how to tell your story. This is probably for me because I help people create their stories, or I don't actually help people create them. You've created your story. I help you to really discover what that is. One of my favorite things to do when I'm working with people is listen to the words they say that they don't hear, and then I pull that apart and we work on creating a story. Now, a story does not have to be some life-threatening moment or some defining line in the sand. Everyone has one of those, and it's wonderful that we can put that together in your story. But it's also can be just little anecdotes that happen on a daily basis. But here with Madeline, we created her personal brand story on the retreat that I run. And that was she was amazed at who she was and where she'd come from. But what it did, it gave her the credibility and capacity to believe in what she did now. It's quite when you define your story and able to tell your story clearly, it really does help you get rid of any imposter phenomena that you may be feeling and really own what you do. One of the ways of telling a story is to choose a moment in time. Choose a story that matters. That's such important, especially when you're wanting to be able to stand on stage and deliver your message. Then choose the story that's going to connect with your audience. Remember, the audience are the most important people in the room. Tell it from your perspective. You can actually tell someone else's story if you choose, but tell it from your perspective as well and how it made you feel. But it's much better if you can focus on telling your story. Look for opportunities to to build into stories. This is one of the fun things that I absolutely love to do, is any moment in time, and when you practice it and you are paying attention, you can do this as well. I guarantee it. And these anecdotes, when I teach speaker training, I say to my students, start collecting anecdotes, relevant anecdotes that fit with what you're doing. And when you're able to just write them down to start with. I know when I started doing the training about 25 years ago, I used to write all of these anecdotes down. Now I don't have to, they just pop through and I remember what they are. But it's easy to make up anecdotes also. I was walking this morning. I try and get, 5,000 steps in before breakfast each morning. And I do a little quick video about what maybe the thought is of the morning. And it's finding those ideas. So I went to go for my walk and I looked at my phone. Well, my phone buzzed at me and it said, you've only got 20% charge left. You need to recharge. And I love listening to books as I walk and creating videos. So I thought, right, I need to go back home and put it on charge. So then my story became, isn't that something we sometimes need to do ourselves? Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had this little thing pop up in our lives that says, slow down, you need to recharge, instead of just pushing through all the time? So you can find a story and anecdote in everything. And if that's relevant to what you're teaching, then make sure that you collect them, you write them down, you store them up, and you remember to deliver them. You'll be amazed at how your clients, how your prospects will remember things a lot more when you tell it in a story form. And if you're writing a story, then write as you speak. We want to, again, be seen as authentic. I've got a couple of friends when they're great writers, and it's write as you speak. And I was going to say speak as you write also. And they're great, brilliant writers. They've got beautiful words. And they speak with those same words, and they've got a great command of the English language. But they put on when they speak, they put on a posh voice. It's not authentic. It's not them. It's unnecessary. But when you speak as you write and write as you speak, then everything that is you comes across. I've written a couple of books. One is called Good Girls Do Sell, and the other one is Being Unstoppable. Both of them are very easy reads, very much like this. It's exactly how I speak. And everyone, so many people have come back and said, it's such an easy read, but they could hear me in the book, which is a great compliment. And looking at the quote for this one, there is no agony greater than bearing an untold story within you. Writing books has become very, very popular for people because they've got these stories. But can you imagine if you can get up on stage and tell the story and do it well and do it succinctly, whether you've only got 60 seconds to do it or you've got 60 minutes? It's such a powerful space to be able to be in. Know how to get attention is number 5. I'd like you to think about these people and whether you've ever heard of them. Nils Boland, Philo Farnsworth, Alfred Russel Wallace, or Lewis Latimer. I think there's a fairly good chance, unless you've done some of my workshops before, that you may not have heard of any of these gentlemen. Now, Nils Boland, he created the first 3-point seatbelt. So you imagine the tens, millions of people around the world, the lives he's saved with that one invention, 3-point seatbelt. Philo Farnsworth, he surprisingly, you might not be aware of this, he actually developed TV. So he was one of the first people that, I don't want to say invented, because there was other people working on it, but he was sort of the powerhouse behind the inventions of TV. Alfred Russel Wallace, he put together the theory of natural selection. He didn't have the same contacts or the same way of getting his information out as did Charles Darwin. And it's been told that Charles Darwin may have collected some of Alfred Russel Wallace's information and put that together in his book of natural selection. But Alfred just did not know how to promote himself and promote his brand and get his information through. And Lewis Latimer, oh my gosh, this man, this incredible inventor, he had a carbon filament to go into a light bulb. So he was really the first person Edison's accredited with the light bulb, but it didn't work that well. Whereas with Lewis Latimer, he created the incandescent light bulb, but with the filament that made it work for a lot longer. But he also, he had early air conditioning. He created the railroad car bathroom as well. And he had a lot to do with inventing the telephone. So there's a lot of people around the world that have got amazing stories. They've got amazing products, but they're unheard of. I don't want that for you. I want you to be able to apply these things I've been talking about, how that you can get your brand out there, whether it is people rely on social media, but you get in front of an audience and you're speaking in front of an audience, you then become the expert. And that's what I love to see from my clients, is that they are seen and perceived as the expert in the room because they're the ones delivering the message. But there's a whole lot of ways to do it. But if you haven't done all of the 4 previous points and really understood what your audience wants to hear, why you are doing what you're doing, what is your mission to achieve in the world, how that it reacts with your values, then you will not build up that connection with your audience. You will not get known, and you will not be seen, and you will not be able to build that authority in the marketplace. So we want to change all that up. So we want to be able to, step up to stand out, which is such an important factor, really owning it and taking that level of confidence and putting it out there. Whether that is creating a video or it is social media marketing or it's standing on stage. To do that, if you're not confident with things, then get some assistance to do it. I love this quote. If you don't give the market the story to talk about, they will define your brand story for you. If you're not branding yourself, you can be sure others are doing it for you. Now, isn't that powerful? You need to take the steps, have the confidence to put yourself out there. So let's look at those 4 points again, or 5 points again. Know your why, know your product, know your audience, know how to tell your story, and know how to get attention. If any of those things that we've talked about really resonated with you and you would like to have a further conversation, you can visit Stand 613. I have got quite a bit of information there that you are able to download, take away with you following this expo. But more importantly, I'd like you to book a complimentary strategy call. We can have a conversation about what might be the best steps for you to take to elevate that brand, whether it is through speaker training, whether it is through sales training, how to get your brand out on LinkedIn so the right people can find you, how to create your vision or mission statement, but importantly, really how to define your why and why someone would want to buy from you, deal with you. And that way, if you get that message right, you can get that sales pitch right, you can get that presentation right, you can get your LinkedIn profile right, everything can flow from there. And I love helping people do exactly that. So remember, visit Stand 613, download the information, and email me when you get there and you've got any questions. I'd love to hear from you. Have a fantastic expo and enjoy all the presentations. Bye from me, Janine Boswell.